This flight to the International Space Station. With us today to discuss all of the details on this EVA kind of day are Brian Smith, the lead space station flight director for STS-129, and Sarah Kazukowicz-Corona, the lead spacewalk officer for the mission. And we'll start off with Brian.
Thanks, Rob. Good afternoon. Welcome to Flight Day 6. We had another successful day. Our streak has continued. Today was fantastic. We got everything we wanted to get done accomplished, and a few more things as well, and Sarah will get into some of those details. The day started off similar to how the day before had started off, by waking the crew again in the middle of the night. This time it was a little more significant since we had two of our spacewalkers in what we call camp out in the airlock. We had a recurrence of the same problem we had 2 nights ago, where we had a false emergency depress signal generated from the Russian module, the MRM-2, the new module that arrived to the ISS on November 12th. We're still not sure exactly what's causing this signal to originate from that module. The teams did a fantastic job responding to that false emergency signal last night. That signal spawned a secondary emergency signal, also false, in the airlock, which is where we had our 2 spacewalkers sleeping. So the reconfiguration required overnight as a result of those 2 false signals was significant. The team did a great job. They had done it 1 night before, so they kind of knew what to do. But what complicated it was the crew members inside. So Sarah will tell you how we ended up recovering from that and retaining the EVA on today's timeline. We had a backup plan in place that we had prepared for pre-flight. We'd actually prepared for something like this occurring, and so we were ready to go. And Sarah will have those details. In a way, it's a shame it occurred overnight when a lot of people were asleep. You get to watch this 24/7. But when the team was at its absolute best, most people were sleeping. So let me tell you that they did a fantastic job. And if you were watching, you got to see a glimpse of something you don't see a lot. What you see when the mission goes well is we make it look easy, but it's not. For years, we go through our training and we prepare for these scenarios that played out in the last 2 nights. And because of that training, these teams were able to respond in a professional manner. And it was not only just the team here at NASA, but it was the teams worldwide. This is an international space station with control centers all over the world, and everybody did a great job integrating their recovery steps and talking to each other and recovering last night so that we could do a spacewalk today. By the time my team came in to execute the spacewalk, what had happened the night before was transparent to us, because the teams had done such a fabulous job getting us back into what we would call a nominal configuration and ready to get out the door. We successfully installed ELC2. We looked at the animation of that installation yesterday, and it went perfect. No issues whatsoever. We got it latched, we got the power and data connected to it, and it was checked out by the flight control team in Huntsville, Alabama. So both ELCs successfully installed on the space station. 2 of our major objectives for this mission had been accomplished. We completed our spacewalk today. We got through all the nominal objectives we wanted, plus some get-aheads that Sarah will walk you through. So now we're just about at the end of the crew day today. Tomorrow is going to be off-duty time. So the space station crew is going to get a full day off, and the shuttle crew will get about a half day off or so. There'll be 1 science experiment being performed by the space station crew, by Jeff and Nicole, but that's about the extent of the workday for the station crew. Later in the day, the shuttle crew will start preparing for EVA 3. That will be Randy and Bobby, with Mike being the IV crew member. They'll go through their tool configurations, check out their suits, and go through the procedure review. And EVA 3 is going to look a little different. Sarah will talk to you about that, since we got some of those tasks done already. So we'll spend the next day or 2 figuring out what the rest of EVA 3 is going to look like. We'll get that up to the crew so they can study and be prepared. And so that's where we are right now. The mission is proceeding extremely well. Shuttle crew is doing great, station crew is doing great, and all the ground teams are doing great.
Okay, thank you, Brian. First, I'll get into a little more of the details of how the crew got out the door this morning. So we went into the night last night doing our camp out protocol. So all of this is to get all of the nitrogen out of the crew members' bodies before they would be outside EVA. And the initial plan was to go in the airlock. They spend the night there. It's depressed down to 10.2. They wake up in the morning. They repress the airlock. They're able to take a hygiene break, get some things together, get back into the airlock. And sorry, the thing I'm missing here is when they repress in the airlock, they do have a mask on, so they are breathing pure oxygen. So when you repress back up to 14.7, take your break, you go back into the airlock with the mask on, depress down to 10.2 again, and at that point, you get into the suit. Once you're in the suit breathing, you're on your pure oxygen again. So that was the plan. That's what we did on EVA 1. So when it got interrupted last night, the question came up, well, should we just continue with the camp out protocol? And getting the airlock back into the config to depress down to 10.2, it basically would have started our day about 2.5 hours later than if we got up in the morning and did this exercise protocol. So the team opted to have the crew just go to bed at 14.7, and they would start their EVA preparations in the morning. So with the exercise protocol, the crew members, they put on a mask, breathing pure O2. Each crew member exercises for 10 minutes on the bike, and then they get into airlock, depresses down to 10.2, and get in the suits that way. Each way, you can still have your 6.5-hour EVA, but since the crew was woken up and they missed some sleep, they opted to sleep in a little bit, which had our planned EVA time, which was 6:30. We bumped that down to the 6 hours. And it was an easy decision since the last 30 minutes of this EVA was just scheduled get-ahead time. So we did not have a solid task planned in that place. So we were pretty confident we wouldn't be losing any mission content by sleeping in and only having a 6-hour EVA. So with that, the crew actually got out the door about 10 minutes early on the day. And going into their tasks, the first task was installing a European antenna assembly. There were 2 antennas that were launched up in a toolbox on the shuttle. So the crew members went to the shuttle payload bay, retrieved this antenna assembly, and took it out to the Colubus module, and that was installed with no issues at all. Then both of the crew members headed out to the truss, where we had it's a floating potential measuring unit that was installed on one side of the truss, and they took the experiment itself that was connected to a stanchion and relocated that as one unit to the other side of the truss. And again, that was for interference on a module coming up, and it's also, we needed to move that for some of the robotics we have on EVA 3. So they were able to do that, and then they went on out to S3 and were able to deploy another payload attach system. So this is similar to the one that we deployed on EVA 1. And things were going, again, very well, very smooth. There was a WETTA antenna that they installed, which was, WETTA antenna is the cameras that they have on while they're out EVA. This was an antenna for that. So we installed that, and looking at the timeline, we were about an hour and a half ahead, and it made sense to go ahead and deploy the third and final payload attach system. And if we did it on this EVA today, we figured we'd save ourselves about 20 to 30 minutes. And if we doing it now instead of holding that off to EVA 3, since the crew was already in the location of it, they just did one, they had the rhythm down, and so they deployed that with no problem. looking at the time, we still had some time to do some other get-aheads on the EVA. So for EVA 1, there was a